of our democracy. In Unitarian Universalism, the highest decision-making authority rests with the individual congregation. It is you, the members of People's Church, together in your collective wisdom who are in charge here. There is no higher authority than this group gathered right here in person, on Zoom, voting later. There is no bishop or pope or committee or minister who can tell you what to do or who can overrule the decisions that you make today. This is a precious power, a power that our religious ancestors fought for and sacrificed for. They believed that each individual congregation should have the right to shape its future, and we are the heirs of that legacy. Of course, for many things in our life together, this is an impractical power. It would be hard if we expected all 248 members of our church to come together to choose the music for today, or to figure out what are the best plants to grow on the mound in our memorial garden, or to monitor the finances, or to make the quick decisions that are sometimes necessary. Like when the water starts running out of a wall in the church building, which happened on Thursday. But it was fixed because of the fast acting building and grounds crew. Thank you, all of you. So today you live our faith and do the work of our congregation by giving away some of your power, by sharing power with specific people in the church. You give power away by electing new members of the board who will provide oversight, vision, and guidance for this institution, leadership who will carry us forward. You give it away by electing members of the nominating committee to identify your future leaders. You give it away by drafting a budget that sets priorities and provides financial constraints for the work of staff, committees, and others in the church for the coming year. So as we begin this important work of the church, and as you vote in the coming weeks, let us enter into gratitude and awareness. Gratitude for the ancestors who fought for the power you wield today and the generations that have brought People's Church to this moment. And an awareness that participating in our small democracy at People's Church is an act of faith. Faith that we need one another in community. Faith that together we are wiser and more capable than we ever can be alone. Faith in each other and our abilities to work together to move our congregation towards a beloved community, embracing and serving our diverse world. So come, let us be about this holy work. Come, let us gather together. Come, let us begin our annual congregational meeting.
Good morning, and welcome to People's Church. Whether you are in this space with us through Zoom or in person, if you're here for the first time or the 100th, with your time and energy to be in communication of the Unitarian Universalist Association, part of a long tradition of liberal religion. We are people of all ages, people of many backgrounds, and people of many beliefs. We are brave, curious, and compassionate thinkers and doers. We create spirituality and community beyond boundaries, working for more justice and more love in our own lives and in the world. I'm Susan Mordyke, and I'm honored to be here today serving as president of your board of trustees as we come together today in this multi-platform environment to engage in people's ritual of shared democratic leadership and conduct the business of our congregation. Thank you for being with us today. The reading for the chalice lighting today is called Chalice Lighting for the Work of the Congregation, written by Eric Walker Winstrom, former Worship and Music Resources Director of the UUA. If you are lighting a chalice at home, you are encouraged to type in the chat box, "A chalice is lit," and mention your neighborhood, street, community, city, as you wish. As we approach our agenda, let us remember that we are doing the work of the congregation. When we do the work of this congregation, we touch lives. When we touch lives, we change the world. May this chalice flame we now kindle remind us throughout our meeting of our ministry and our mission.
I invite you to rise, embody your spirit in preparation for our first song together, number 347. Gather the spirit, harvest the power. Our separate fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour. Our trials in this light appear all the same. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit of heart and mind, seeds for the sowing are laid in store, nurtured in love and conscience refined, with body and spirit united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit growing in all, drawn by the moon and fed by the sun, winter to spring and summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again.
I don't very often get to hear the congregation singing from this direction, and it's great. It's great. Again, you don't have to be good at it, you just have to want to do it, right? So we gather on the land of the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, the Odawa, the Potawatomi. Indigenous nations of the Great Lakes region are also known as the Anishinaabe, or original people, and their language is Anishinaabemowin. We acknowledge the enduring relationship that exists between the people of the Three Fires and this land. We gather today to work together as a community to finalize the ballot that will be distributed to all people's people tomorrow. If amendments to the package presented to the congregation are proposed today, we will engage in discussion and vote to decide if the amendment is reflected in the final ballot. We celebrate that the votes of members attending on Zoom and members attending in person both formally count in making decisions about an amendment during this meeting. A motion that is made, seconded, and discussed will be reflected in the final ballot if 50% of the people plus one of the members that vote approve for it to go forward. This is consistent with how we've done this in the past. The successful vote is based on the number of members present that vote. Tomorrow, the finalized ballot and budget will be sent to all members of the congregation, consistent with our practice of these past 2 years. This allows 100% of the congregation to be able to vote for the final ballot. Members will receive their ballot following the same method used to distribute the monthly newsletter, unless you've already made arrangements with Melissa in our church office. The return votes are due 2 weeks from tomorrow on Monday, June 6th. This allows time for members unable to join us today to watch the video of this meeting as part of their decision-making process. The final results will be tallied during that week immediately following the 6th, and the results will be shared in the Friday email, June 10th. I hope that all just made sense to everybody. If there's any questions. All right. And now we gather in hope, compassion, and strength to celebrate once and again. The annual congregational meeting will come to an order. So one of the things that's different with the passing of the bylaws is that this meeting no longer requires a quorum in order to conduct business, because the vote gets sent to 100% of the congregation. But we do still need to have a record of the number of members that are present. So if I could ask our tellers to come into the room, we're going to practice something. So during the meeting today, Reverend Rachel and Alan Hunt will serve as the tellers for the Zoom call. And Donna McClurkin and Rick Johnson will serve as the tellers to count the voting cards of those attending in the room. Does everyone in the room that's a member have their voting card? If you're a member, you've signed the bond of union and are a member of the church and don't have your voting card, please go get one. And for those of you on Zoom, if you don't already know where to find it, if you would find the raise hand feature in your Zoom message. And so when we get a couple of folks back in here, we're going to practice how this is going to work in the cases where we actually may need to do a vote. Everybody's so quiet. Yes. Thank you, Martha. Yes, I have been asked to let the folks on Zoom. If you don't know where the raise hand is, it's in the reactions section at the bottom of the screen. All right, I'm going to ask Donna and Rick to come in as soon as everyone has their card. See, this is where we get to experiment again. I have confidence in us. So while we wait for Donna and Rick, if you're a member of People's People and you're on Zoom, would you please activate your raise hand feature so that Rachel and Alan can make sure that they can see you? All right, Rick, if you'll focus on this side of the room, and Donna, if you'll focus on this side of the room. If you are in person, would you please raise your voting card? Donna's going to count this side of the room. Rick's going to count that side of the room, and then we'll record all of the totals. Donna? Donna has 23. Rick's reporting 24. Rachel? Plus 26. My math says that's a total of 73. You have it, Denise? $73 minus 26. I just have my calculator. I didn't write them down. Note to self, next time, keep them separate. Yeah, because Donna was 23, Rick was 24. So yeah, are we ready, Denise? Excellent. All right, look at that. We got to try on something new. So we'll move forward to the approval of the agenda, which is, if you're in the room, is in a, yes, ma'am. Donna. So let's add 2 to the in-person total. 3. And Barb. And probably me too. See, this is why we practice, right? So that should revise our total to 77. Perfect. All right. With that, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda, which, if you're in the room, there were packets that were printed, and I believe there's going to be an attempt to put the agenda in the chat for those of you that are online. The only comment I have about the agenda is that there is a typo in number 8, and instead of presentation of slate for the nominating committee, it should be the presentation of slates from the nominating committee. So from them, not for them. Are there any other additions or corrections to the agenda? I don't see any in the room. Rachel, do you have any feedback online? All right, hearing none, the agenda is approved as presented with the correction of for to from. Thank you for that.
Please repeat.
Just a request that we make sure that we've given enough time for the people on Zoom to enter their questions in the chat if needed, or to come online to speak. All right. You're going to get tired of hearing from me before the end of the day because it's my turn again. So this year ends my term on your Board of Trustees, and I am very grateful that you entrusted me and that the board members entrusted me with being your leader during the course of this year. I'm going to leave all of the financial details to Alan, so you will not find all the financial details in my part of the report today. But I spent some time rereading newsletters and weekly emails, and this is what I found. So here we are in May of 2022, having weathered roughly 2.5 years of COVID-19 conditions. While we may find ourselves still wondering when pandemic conditions will be over, our church continues to fare quite well as an institution and as a community. This year, we've had the opportunity to welcome new staff. Ethan Semmelbauer now assists Denise Villette with the custodial duties. And most recently, Melissa Emmerich has accepted the role as office administrator, joining Diana Lundquist to round out our office team. While saying goodbye to the good folks that have previously filled these roles is bittersweet, we are glad to have a full staff in these challenging times. We have finally achieved the process of aligning roles and responsibilities to allow our longtime volunteers, Alan Hunt, Barb Davis, and Mary Carroll, to step back as we started planning for almost 3 years ago. We are fortunate that we currently have the resources to provide compensation that aligns with the UUA guidelines, even without the benefits of the PPP loans that were available during COVID-19. Hopefully, over the next year, we will find ourselves in a position to commit ourselves to providing wages that exceed UUA guidelines in some cases and reach for a minimum of $15 an hour, or maybe even more, for our very talented and committed team. In addition to our staff, our church programs and administration are fueled by the energy, passion, and labor of 22 volunteer committees and the Board of Trustees. Even through COVID times, we have managed to still facilitate book clubs, chalice circles, including the creation of 2 new ones, anti-racism discussion groups, mindfulness meditation, film discussions, study groups, Saturday discussions, and facing life and death sessions. Examples of initiatives by our committees include the installation of 2 electric vehicle charging stations, which resulted from a grant application to Consumers Energy by our Green Sanctuary Committee. The Green Sanctuary Committee also helped us achieve a 20% reduction in energy use in the church building through a combination of solar panels, wall insulation, and other conservation and efficiency measures. Peoples has even been awarded a Cool Congregation certificate by the Interfaith Power and Light. This year has also seen Peoples collaborating with Congregation of Moses, Temple B'nai, Israel, and Samaritas in supporting the resettlement of Afghan families. For a while, we were quite the storage location for the collection of household items. The Commons was full. We continued to explore using our outdoor space so we could gather in person. In June of 2021, as a result of our flourishing investment portfolio at the time, the board was able to allocate $19,000 for RE to invest in new outdoor features to create outdoor learning and play spaces. This new equipment let our RE team reimagine what could be offered for our youth in the fall, which was received with great excitement. Outdoor services were offered in September and October so we could begin coming back together in person with a separate Zoom service in the evening as well. We hosted an expo of electric vehicles through a partnership with Kalamazoo Electric Vehicle Association. A smaller version of our Fine Arts Bazaar was held, much to the joy of artists and customers alike. The calendar year ended with a Christmas Eve service out in our Circle Drive, and the new year was welcomed with a bonfire at the fire pit. Most recently, we moved our white elephant sail out to the Circle Drive this May, which was also received well. Over this church year, our regathering team was able to provide us with ways to begin returning to our indoor space. Limited attendance in person started in October using a sign-up system and initiated our multi-platform format. There was even a Connections game night in room 19 in October. In February, attendance in the Commons was expanded to 87 family groups / COVID pods with masks, of course. As vaccinations became available, RE for our youth was able to resume indoors. People's ringers and singers were able to practice in person and start performing live. And congregational singing with masks began again in April. Think about that compared to where we were a year ago. This year, the board identified 3 goals for our work with the congregation, including growing our partnerships and solidarity with community, practicing difficult conversations in healthy and productive ways, and revising people's written policies that guide decision-making. The board acknowledged that both synergy and tension exist between the personal transformation and the work of transforming the church as an institution. The board aimed to do both concurrently and with continuous learning for improvement. While not all our ideas were able to be completed, some major steps were achieved. Being able to gather in person allowed us to have a special congregational meeting to conclude the process of revising the bylaws of People's Church. The bylaws committee collected feedback from the congregation during conversations in the fall of 2021 and released the final version to the congregation in November. Efforts to promote communication were facilitated by the board starting at the turn of the year. And at the meeting in February, the actions of 2020 and 2021 virtual meetings and congregational votes were formally validated. And after some very heartfelt sharing and conversation, we did leave the meeting with a revised set of bylaws. And we were able to release the bylaws committees from 2 years of service to our congregation. One of our benefits, starting at the 2022 annual meeting, is that we can now formally allow voting by members participating via electronic means. In follow-up to the special congregational meeting and as part of the board's commitment to the congregation, a subcommittee of the board, along with Reverend Rachel, have conducted many conversations with members of the conversation. The team invited the whole congregation to 2 sessions called Listening Across Generations, which were held just last week in May. The inspiration to begin here comes from the generational divisions we witnessed in our church that have been widened by the pandemic. We are grateful to be navigating toward what our new normal will look like. And the year isn't done yet, as if we had not achieved a lot already, right? June brings participation at the Pride Parade, Peace and Nature Camp, and an Inquirer series for new members. As we come back together, it seems that there are more people that are curious about our congregation, which is great news as we journey out of COVID times. And lastly, I am thrilled, absolutely thrilled, to share the news that there is great reason for celebration in our congregation. The board is pleased to announce that the bounty of our investment portfolio has allowed the board to approve the final payoff. I can do this. The final payoff of the loan that was taken out for our building expansion. We are planning to have a recognition and celebration during one of our last services in June. And I get to have fun now. They wouldn't let me have the real one. Helps that my partner's a magician. What a year. Give yourselves another round because everybody in this room contributed to that. All right. Barb, let me know that I missed a step. This is why I need her. I'm going to go back just a step. We do need to do the approval of the special congregational meeting minutes from February, which were in the package. So hopefully you've had a chance to look at those. They've been posted since shortly after the meeting in the members section online. Does anyone have any additions or corrections to the minutes of the February 27th, 22 meeting? I know we go from something fun to something so boring. I'm not seeing any. Rachel and Alan, are we getting any feedback online about any changes or corrections? All right, hearing none, the agenda, or excuse me, the minutes from the special congregational meeting are approved as presented. And now I'd like to invite Rachel Baer to come and report for us on behalf of the nominating committee and present the slates for next year's Board of Trustees and nominating committee members.
It actually says burn the mortgage in the notes. That was wonderful. Good morning. My name is Rachel Baer, and I come to you representing the nominating committee for the 2021-22 church year. The other members of the committee this year were Joe Hampel, Gary Ledley, Patrick Murray, Patrick Van Slambrook, our fearless leader chair, Sandy Steele, and Steve Ferguson, who was the board appointee. Following the procedures as outlined in the church bylaws, the nominating committee developed a slate of candidates for your consideration and approval. 3 for the church board of trustees and 2 for the nominating committee to serve 3-year terms beginning in the upcoming church year. The candidates were presented to the congregation through published photos and biographies in the April newsletter. Did I just go right in? Okay. The board nominees for the 2022-23 church year are Joe Hampel, Brian Lewis, and Gordon Bolar. Our nominating committee nominees are Steve Kavanaugh and Lois Leffler. We thank them all for their willingness to serve our congregation.
All right. So according to our bylaws, no additional nominations for the Board of Trustees can be made at this time. All those in favor of presenting the slate to be voted on by all members of the congregation, please raise your voting card if you are in the room. And again, Donna's going to count one side, Rick's going to count the other side. And if you are on Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature. You want to make sure that you're focused. Yep. All right. Are the tellers ready? And you can put your cards down. Donna? Rick? So in the room, that gives us 50 in favor. Do we have a count for the Zoom online for in favor? Online, we have 24 in favor. And now we have to do the other side. All those opposed to presenting the slate to be voted on by all members, please raise your voting card or use the raise hand feature. Rick and Donna, I can see it, but would you please still report in the room, please? Okay, in the room, there are 0 people opposed. Online? Online, there are also 0 opposed. All right. So thank you again to those that have accepted nomination to the Board of Trustees. Your names are formally going to the congregation for full voting. Thank you. All right, for the nominating committee, also according to our bylaws, no additional nominations for the nominating committee can be made at this time. I think we need to come up with a new name for the nominating committee because you nominate to the nominating committee. All those in favor of presenting the slate to be voted on by all members, please raise your voting card. This is for the nominating committee, which is Lois Loeffler and Steve Kavanaugh. All right, you can put your cards down, please. Donna? 26 in favor. Rick? 24. This number sounds familiar. So there are 50 people in the room that are in favor. Do we have our online? 22 people voting by Zoom in favor of moving forward the names of the nominating committee. Those opposed to putting forward the slate of the nominating committee, please raise your voting cards or use the raise hand feature online. All right, Donna? Rick? All right, right, so there are 0 opposed in the room to move forward the nominator slate. Rachel? For the, so you need me to go back to which part? The nays? Yes. All right, we're on the nominating committee slate. So if you're on Zoom, we're voting for those that are opposed to moving forward the slate. Please re-raise your hands if you are opposed. Okay, we have one Zoom participant that is voting not to move the slate forward. I think I got all that. I do think, though, that we are at more than 50% plus one of people voting. So thank you to those of you that have accepted being considered for the nominating committee. Again, Steve Kavanaugh and Lois Loeffler, that will be moved forward to the full vote of the congregation. So at this time, I'd like to invite Alan Hunt to come up. He's going to present the investment fund report, stewardship campaign report, and address the presentation of the budget and any questions that you may have about the budget. If you have a motion that you want to make about the budget, please hold that until Alan's been able to answer all the questions, and then I'll come back and facilitate any conversations about amendments and that part of it. Just make sure that he's able to answer your questions for you. Does that make sense? And if you're on Zoom, please let Rachel know that you would like to ask a question so that we can make sure that you have an opportunity to speak and can be included. Alan?
Thank you, Susan. I'm going to start with the stewardship report, and you've heard this so many times. It's going to go really fast, and then I'm going to slow down a little bit. But basically, as of Friday, this past Friday, we had 121 pledges for $238,000. That compares to last year's 147 pledges for $270,000. So we're a little short. And when you take out the fact, which is good news, that we have 8 new pledges from new people, that means we have 34 people who are outstanding have not submitted their pledge. And that amounts to about $32,000 at last year's rates. Some people probably left the church. We don't know who they are yet because we haven't had a full chance to reconnect. Some of them are just late. And some are holding their pledge to waiting to see what happens with the debate about Title III. Basically, we're behind where we should be and where we want to be, but we've been behind all along, so that's not news. When I get to the budget presentation, I'll talk more about that. So we're basically seeing our pledge income, projected pledge income, down about $15,000 over what we've had this fiscal year. The big question about pledges is what we call non-pledged contributions. And I've talked about this before, but just to repeat it so everyone understands, we had an income of approximately $35,000 this fiscal year from people who were making non-pledged contributions to the church. A lot of them, most of them were members. We haven't followed it up all the way, but basically people who had the means to make more contributions to make up for those who they knew were out there who couldn't make their contributions. So obviously, if we do that again next year, we don't have to worry about being $30,000 short in pledges at this point. But let me remind you, there are quite a few who are late. I know who they are because they mostly are late every year, but that's another story. I want to conclude this quickly by saying Reverend Rachel's favorite, people's people are generous people. And I promise to keep you informed as this goes on towards the end of the year. Moving on to the investment report, which is a little more challenging. And this is based upon the investment committee report, which was submitted in late April and based upon, May 1st, I see the date there, based upon the value of our investments as of March 30th of this year. The value at that point was $583,776 for all our endowment accounts. You probably have been reading or hearing the desperate announcements about the stock market. We have lost about $50,000 in value since that time. We're now down to $531,000 in our endowment accounts. That's all four that we call endowment accounts. They aren't technically all endowments, but we have two true endowment accounts: perpetual pledge, which means that every year 5% of the value of that fund comes out for the benefit of the church, and the community service and outreach, which has the same payout, 5%, but it is strictly limited to non-member and support of the community as a whole. In addition, we have memorial funds, which are contributions in memory of people, and the Palmer Unrestricted Fund, which is generally the one that we get the most action from. The Palmer Unrestricted Fund at the moment is approximately $210,000. That's the funds that the board has the right, or the people of the church have the right to use in any way they see fit. That includes the drop in the whole amount, so that's good. In addition, we have a reserve account, which at the moment has actually $71,000 in it, but $21,000 of that is already earmarked, so it's at the projected level of $50,000, which is our target. Let me just make sure I said everything I wanted to say. Obviously, there's nothing we can do about the stock market. We only have about half our funds invested in things you would call stocks, mostly domestic, but about, I think it's 9% is overseas. We have bonds, of course, which are also a little bit shaky now because as interest rates rise, bond values go down. We haven't suffered any significant losses yet. We're holding our own, but that's still, we're at the mercy of the market. So our investments are not strong at this point, but they're still substantial. And I'm going to come back to that again in the budget because we're going to draw on some of those this year, we think. Any questions about either of those areas before I go on to the budget itself? Okay. Budget development for People's Church is usually not that big a problem. And first I want to describe the process that we go through. Initializing the process is the request going out to all committee chairs and administrative decision makers who are asked to submit their request for budget for next fiscal year. So it starts with that permissive step. What do you want? What do you think you need? Second, Diana and I tabulate these together with our estimate of pledge income, which is based upon those estimates that we've been giving every Sunday in church and the ones I just gave you for last Friday. So we're putting together the income side from pledges and the request side from activities of the church at the same time. Then Reverend Rachel and I discussed the salary question, and I'll tell you, frankly, this year I went in hoping for a 5% cost of living adjustment and decided we couldn't afford that, so we are going to present to you a 3% cost of living adjustment. It's not keeping up with what we're seeing right now, which is about 8% in the economy, but it's what we think we can afford, and you're going to see the parameters that go around that. Then the draft budget that comes out of that process is circulated to members of the Finance Committee, and we have a regular meeting to discuss those issues. All Finance Committee members participate, and we had a good exchange this year, more than typical. So changes are made based upon those recommendations from members of the Finance Committee. What I call the second draft budget goes to the Board of Trustees. Again, we discussed that at a meeting of the Board of Trustees. There's one very dramatic development this year that came out of that discussion, which was the fact that the board decided to dedicate the remaining funds that they had at their control from the investment committee. So we had passed from the investment committee to the board jurisdiction, if you will. They decided to put the remainder of their funds against the deficit that we brought them in that second budget. You'll see them, we'll get to the numbers, but that third draft budget is the one that has been circulated to you, all of you, I hope, and is part of your packet. You can see it. We'll get there eventually, and we aren't going to go into great detail, but I'm going to give you the overview. So that will be voted upon in this same process during this next 2 weeks after tomorrow. And all voting members will get a chance to say yay or nay on the budget and any amendments that come out of this meeting today. So that's yet to come. As I've said at the start, this is usually not too difficult because we usually have last year, complete year, and this year, most of a year, 9 months usually, 10 months. And we juggle that based upon what we know happened in the church, and one of those is probably a good number, and we go from there. Having 2.5 years of flawed data to look at since the start of the pandemic. So we're going back 3 full years to look at an entire budget cycle, which makes it a little more challenging, to be honest. However, we didn't put as much stock in the reality of the 2018-19 fiscal year as we might have. We tried to interpret what would fit between that full perfect year and where we are now. So it's a lot more projections than in the past. Okay, overview. As I mentioned, we're providing a 3% raise for all employees as a cost of living adjustment, plus adjustments to the UUA to comply with the UUA schedule for the DRE, Diane, and our music director, Savannah. When combined with the upgrades to the positions that we made that were mentioned by Susan, the church administrator and the bookkeeper, that means our personnel costs are going to be up 13% next year over where we are right now. No one's asked me, but I will say both the replacements are more expensive, and in my opinion, they're well worth the money. We'll see how it works out. The other thing I want to mention in terms of just a highlight before we get into any questions about line items is the UUA Fair Share Pledge is just under $20,000 for next year. And you may remember that we resumed our what used to be called the Fair Share Pledge 2 years ago. And this year we were paying $22,000. There's been a slight change in the formula they use, but it's based on our size and our budget. So again, we are continuing to pay our fair share, or at least that's in the budget. We hope to be able to pay it. If things don't go straight to hell, we should be able to do that. And I'm talking about the stock market and these other items that are not under our control. Okay, total budget is up about 3.8% for next year. And our projected revenue at this point looks like it'll be down about 5.8% at minimum. That left us with what I would call a gross operating deficit of over $45,000. We were prepared to go forward with that. However, as I mentioned, the board in their review of this budget decided to dedicate their additional $21,321 that they were holding to this problem, to put us back to a net deficit, which you'll see in the copy that you have, of a little over $24,000. So this is based upon an anticipating drop in pledges. Doesn't make any assumption about whether we'll have more members or fewer members, but just in terms of the dollars that we think we can earmark that are coming in, and the increase in costs that we have been talking about for the last 3 years. Before I ask for your questions, I just want to make a couple more points. There's 3 negative factors I want to mention and 3 positive factors as we look forward. First, the fact that current pledges are down is certainly a problem. It could be as much as $30,000. And as I said, some are holding back their pledges, waiting to see what happens with the bylaws. Others are still out there somewhere in the woods, and we don't know if they're coming back or not. And I'm sure we will get some more new members. 8 is not a lot, but 8 for no meetings in 2 years is pretty good. Second, investment earnings are down, and there's nothing we can do about that except hope that it comes back. There's no strategy that we can follow that will reverse those losses. This is basically something that all investors are going through. Third, I want to mention, because this is more variable, it's the outlook for rentals and fundraisers in this next year. As you know, our rentals went to 0 during the pandemic. They are coming back slowly. No one knows how many of these organizations are going to continue to meet in person, how many are going to Zoom for the rest of their existence, who knows. Anyway, we have scaled back our estimated revenues on fundraisers by $25,000. Some of that could easily come back. We hope that it does. But we're not counting on it. On the positive side, first of all, we do have, as I reported, substantial savings and investments. As I said, the Palmer Fund right now is at $210,000. That is available at any time that we need it by vote of the congregation and the Board of Trustees. Second, I have every hope that rentals and fundraisers may be coming back. That's a new assignment for our new administrator, Melissa, and I'm confident that she will be doing a better job than what we've been doing in the past at finding those rentals. Again, we're budgeting $11,600 for that line item. Back in 2019, our last regular year, it was $32,000. So that's a huge difference. And I want to also reiterate, during the pandemic, we've had substantial non-pledged contributions from members of the church. We are not counting on that, but I expect it will materialize if we need it. And I promise to let you know if we need it. So for those of you who have the means to help out more, you may be waiting for the call. Okay, I'm willing to take any items on specific line items that you might have, or comments, whatever. And just point out that since we have 2 weeks to vote, I am personally willing to take any emailed questions. If you just send them to me, you find me in the directory, but hahunt@gmail.com. I would be happy to entertain those. I would prefer that you didn't call because I need the time to pull things together to respond, but something that you don't want to bring up today or aren't ready to bring up today or whatever. And they can be included in any amendments to the budget as that goes to the people. Okay, line item questions, anything specific? Yes. I don't think it's on yet, but give it a minute. Oh, it is, okay.
Question about insurance. Does that include Board of Directors liability insurance?
No, does it? Okay,
I didn't hear the answer to that question. Good.
I wasn't aware of that, so I'm glad to be protected and, oh, Church Mutual, okay, right. All right, good question. Stumped me on the first one. Any online? No? Well, okay, thank you very much. It's a budget we're going to live by. I can't promise that it will be. Oh, Zoe? This is time. No, that's all right.
Good morning. I am Zoe Villette. I use she, her pronouns. So about the $15 an hour wage that our president mentioned in her report, I am so grateful that we have started having conversations about this, and I encourage more conversations, and I want to talk about it. If you want to talk about it, I want to talk about it. So, you know, there are lots of ways to figure out appropriate wages, but the most basic one is our basic wage that we pay here to our employees at People's Church. We have several employees who are making significantly less than $15 an hour, which I think is appalling, but that's my personal opinion. MIT's living wage calculator says that in Kalamazoo, a single adult, one-person household needs the bare minimum of $15.98 an hour as a livable wage. And that is based on lots of factors. I'm happy to geek with you on the calculator. And it's a lot lower here than many places because our cost of living is low. To do some math for you, not off the cuff, off the calculator, $15 per hour, assuming a 40-hour work week and working 50 weeks per year, is roughly $31,200. I'd like to ask all of you how comfortable you would feel living on that amount of money pre-tax. $15.98 an hour, to go with the MIT calculator figure, is approximately $33,238. So our first principle is about the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Does that not call us to pay a fair living basic wage? How can we say that we're living out our values as a church if we still pay some of our employees less than a fair living wage? I've got lots of other notes here about other things that I can talk to you about and other arguments. And if you're not convinced this is a good idea, please, I'm happy to talk later in person or online.
due to this discussion. Are all of the employees that you're referring to, are those full-time employees, part-time? I'm unclear.
These are all part-time employees who are paid at an hourly wage, and that wage is significantly less than $15 an hour. If you also have a quibble with why there's even a difference between if this is a full salary or just a couple hours a week, again, happy to talk more about that.
Just to clarify, our minimum is $12.63 an hour at this point. So as Zoe says, it's substantially less than $15 an hour. But those are all part-time people.
Are there any other questions for Alan before he? Is there anyone else who'd like to make comment at this time? Come forward.
Are we voting on the budget today to accept it? Oh, no. Okay, so it's possible to change?
So the way that this is going to have to happen is if we're going to make a vote to amend the budget before it goes out tomorrow, that decision has to be made today. So it would require some work on Alan's part to do some math to, figure out what that would be to get everybody up to $15 an hour for the coming church year. But if that's put forward, then we're looking at potentially a more significant deficit than we are right now. And if the congregation is willing to entertain that in order to make this happen, there are Palmer Fund resources. And of course, hopefully, to Alan's point, we're going to get some outside contributions. Hopefully, we're going to be able to rejuvenate, fundraising activities a little more closer to the level that we've had in the past. So if that's a commitment that you would like to put forward to the full congregation, that amendment would need to be made today, and then it would go to the full congregation in the ballots that go out tomorrow.
I'm not sure what the procedure for this would be, but would it be possible to make a step toward the goal of 15?
We can entertain a motion for discussion and a vote in this room from anyone who would like to make it. And if you're on Zoom and would like to comment, please let Rachel know so we can make sure that you are heard.
Michael Nasani. Yeah, Gordon, with regards to that, and in regards to the issue of increasing salaries to a livable wage, I agree that this should be consistent with our values, so I would support that. And in regards to what you said, Gordon, if this isn't something that we could do immediately, then I would like to see us at least make a commitment to doing this over the next couple of years or whatever it might be. And so that might mean perhaps, stepping it up to get us closer there this year, with the idea that in another year or two, we could achieve that goal. So how we would do that exactly, I would leave that to those of you who are running the numbers, but I would like to see that commitment.
I keep asking for this because I have this thought. There's a couple different kinds of motions you could make right now. One is to just a motion to direct the Board of Trustees to investigate raising all of our hourly people to at least $15 an hour, or at least to a living wage, whatever you want to choose for that. At which point, that does not commit us to this changing this budget, but it would commit the Board of Trustees to arrange it for next year. That's one possibility. Another possibility is to straight up direct Alan, our treasurer, to change the budget to include a living wage for all hourly employees. So So those are some of the choices, but someone has to put up the motion. Okay, since Gordon's
Right.
already talked, I'll come back here.
What would I do without Barb?
The only problem with putting it into the future is that by the time you get there, it won't
Could
be
you
enough.
identify yourself,
Michael
please?
Leonard.
Thank you.
Yeah. The only problem with putting it into the future is by the time you get there, it won't be enough anymore. Unless you define living wage very precisely so that it always keeps up.
You bring it back to Gordon again.
Well, I'm going to move the first option that you mentioned, Barb, and that is that the board of directors be charged with investigating a movement toward the figure of a living wage, however it's defined. And I've heard a couple of figures, but, and that way we could, with the new board coming on, or the current board, I'm not sure which that is, but we can have a reasoned discussion in good time about moving toward a goal that is consistent with our values. And I agree that with Zoe that it is, we need something consistent with our values of the dignity and worth of every person. So
Right.
I move that.
I'll repeat it. Here's my understanding of what is being proposed. Gordon has proposed, is moving that the 2022-2023 Board of Trustees be directed to address a living wage for all employees in next year's budget. In the 2023-24 budget. Is there a second? See multiple seconds. Martha Beverly, I'm sorry, I don't recognize you. And Joe Hample. So we have a second. Is there any further discussion about directing the board to take this action? Barb will meet you.
Is it possible to direct for 22-23 and not put it to 23-24?
So the 2022-23 budget is what's in front of us right now.
So do we need to reject this first to make any changes, or can we ask for change adjustments for this coming?
So Barb, would you help me with the proper order?
Okay, the motion before us right now is to direct the Board of Trustees to do it for the next budget cycle. If you want to do something for this budget cycle, then you need to reject that motion and make another motion. Okay?
So we have to vote first and then decide.
Yes, that if you pass that, the motion that's currently before us, which is about directing the Board of Trustees to do all this stuff for the next budget cycle, if you will have to reject that before you make a change for this year. That would be a different motion. Now, he cannot at this point change his motion. Okay? The other option as a member of the congregation is say that this passes and we pass the budget as it is right now. You could approach the Board of Trustees to give any kind of bonus or other monetary compensation and ask the board to do it on their own hook out of the monies that they can allocate. Okay? You can't make a different proposal right this minute. If after we deal with this motion, then you could bring it up again. Okay?
All right. So to recap, we have a motion to direct the board to take an action, which I'm going to count on the video and Denise to have captured. We have a second. So this would put it into, any changes would go into the 2023-2024 budget. Are there any further comments before we make that decision, and then go, Tom.
I'm Tom Hackley. I'd like to ask Alan if you have I know it's impossible to calculate this exactly, but any ballpark idea of what amount of money we're talking about here?
No, we don't.
I was just looking at that to see if I could give you a guesstimate, and I can't because like the hours are all over the map. You know, some of the childcare people are working like 10 hours a month. You know, I'd have to go back to the basic facts involved and try to estimate, so can't, sorry.
Are there any more comments on the motion in front of us right now? So what will happen is we'll either accept the motion or we'll reject the motion. If we accept the motion, then that's done. If we reject it, then we could potentially look at a different motion.
My name is Don Miller. Geez, Alan, I hate to put you in this spot, but I'm kind of hoping that we'll reject it and that we will start today affirming Zoe's information and steadfastness in trying to make this a just thing for the present and moving forward.
I was just gonna ask. I thought I would.
No, but if nobody else, if nobody else wants to right now, you got it.
Okay. Is there anyone on Zoom? I really want to make sure that we're taking advantage of our multi-platform. Is there anyone on Zoom that would like to make a comment on this motion before it is voted?
So there's a robust conversation happening on Zoom in the chat. They're all trying to make their own motions and all kinds of exciting things, and we're trying to slow it down. But there are questions, including, can we give our people time? Can we give our people time to increase their pledges to support this increase in wages? And people really supporting getting people to $15 an hour in this year's budget.
So we will always accept pledges at any time of the year, even outside of the standard stewardship committee timeframe. So the answer to that is a resounding yes. Please feel free to make your pledges.
Yeah, and then people asking, if we support increasing wages beyond our church, how can we not pay our employees more?
So essentially, it comes down to, if we accept the motion that's in front of us, it delays action until the next budget cycle. So that's what we're going to basically vote on right now is, do you want to delay action until the next budget cycle? Yes or no? Depending on the result of that, we'll take whatever the next step is. Is everyone with me?
All right. Yes, that would be for the next budget cycle. But basically what I'm advocating is due consideration of how much, not why, and how much within the budget and how much more we might need. And certainly the board could, can't speak for that, but come to the congregation with, urging them to increase pledges for that reason. Okay, that could all be done there. And the reason I made the motion is that, respectful of all those in the room who are advocating this increase, I'm advocating a careful, due reason consideration with all the numbers in front of us over time, but Not necessarily. Don't know when the board will address, can't promise that. So that's the reason I made the motion that I made, rather than trying to come up with a figure right here and now. Just don't know what that process is going to be like, but I guess it can be explored if the motion does not pass.
Okay. Any final comment before I call a vote?
I realize that, I'm Vicki Conzen, that we only had so much money pledged and so much money coming in, but it's a decision about how we distribute, what we pay for, what we can do without. But I agree with Zoe that we are first and foremost supportive of each other, of people and their needs. And we're talking about basic survival. We're not talking about luxurious vacations or anything. So I would think that we have to consider, if we are willing to move forward and stand for giving people a fair living wage, which Zoe told us is almost $16 an hour. But even if we just say for this coming year, 2023, we would be willing to readjust our budget, move funds around so that at least all employees of People's Church get what is determined a fair living wage, and not wait another year, as this other gentleman said, where it may change by then. And so I don't want to wait until 23, 24. I feel like we need to make a stand. And so I am suggesting or asking if people reject Gordon, respectfully, Gordon, reject his proposal.
Right. Is there anyone that has not already spoken that would like to make a comment? Barb, we've got.
So my understanding is that by accepting the motion as presented, it doesn't stop the board from being able to find funds in this year to start paying people more. And it gives them more time to figure out where that money is going to come from, considering we're already at a deficit. I would encourage you to support the motion as it stands, give the board some time to think about it, and also encourage them to maybe move faster on that than the deadline we've given them.
Okay, so again, as Rachel said in her opening comment, the board is bound to do whatever this congregation votes for us to do. So in the interest of time, I'm going to bring this motion to a vote. So again, the proposal in front of you, which has been moved and seconded, is for the 2022-2023 Board of Trustees. It will direct them to address fair living wage in the 2023-24 budget. Tellers, are you ready? Those in favor of the action to address this in the 2023-2024 budget, please raise your voting cards in the room or use the raise hand feature on Zoom. And those in favor. No. Barb and I can only vote in the case of a tie right now. Tellers, are we ready? You can put your cards down. Donna? Rick? So we have 28 in favor of the motion in the room. Zoom? 13 in favor on Zoom, for a total of 41. Those that oppose, wait. We're waiting for the Zoom board to clear so that we don't get yes votes mixed with no votes. Ready? Those opposed. You can put your cards down, Rick. Donna? There's 21 in the room that are opposed. Online? 8 opposed online. We've got, just a minute, gotta do math. So we have a total of 70 people voting, which means we would need 36 people for it to pass, and we have 41 in favor of incorporating this into the 2023-24 budget. Sorry. Yes, we will make sure that this is in the ballot. So now, if there's a second action, that part's done now, right? We're going to put that forward, that motion forward to the entire congregation. Is there another amendment to this year's budget that anyone would like to propose?
So I have a question. This is based on a comment from earlier that I'm not sure I understand, but it sounded like we can charge the board with giving bonuses to staff.
At this point, the motion that we just passed will appear on the ballot that will go to everybody. And it essentially charges the board to determine what the numbers would be and put them in next year's budget. If you want something to happen for this year's budget, then there are a couple of alternatives. That's always, if you had an actual number, you could change a line item in the budget, or you could do a similar thing where you direct the board to pay additional, I think how you'd say it. Right now, if we send this budget and this budget is passed, the board has the ability to spend additional monies up to 5% of the total budget, et cetera. So in essence, you could direct them out of that power to give additional monies to employees. So you could indeed still make that motion too. Does this answer your question? Okay.
So
Well,
every year.
The other alternative is, if you don't want to do it in this thing, is that any member of the congregation could approach the board and make the case to the board itself that the board on its own authority should give additional monies to hourly workers. That does not have, but it's not a direction of the congregation then. It's a matter of you as a member going to the board and saying to the board, making the case to the board that you made here.
All right, so for those of you, the board has the ability, based on the bylaws, to spend 5% of the budget, right? You've allowed them to have discretionary use of up to another 5% over and above the operating budget that you see. So that's one potential place where bonuses could come from. The second place is if our investments recover, there's a formula that if we have more than X number of dollars in our investments, then anything that's over that amount comes to the board for discretionary use. That's the money that we use to pay for the playground equipment. That's the money that we use to bring down the deficit. Now, that money, of course, is not guaranteed because we don't know what our investment portfolio is going to do, in the next years. And then obviously there is availability of Palmer Fund monies in the case of, extreme emergencies, but also keep in mind that we do have some building things that may be coming up that are going to need to be considered over the course of this next year. So there are options to be able to guide the board in how they use those discretionary funds if the congregation chooses to do it. But I just want people to understand that where those funds sit right at the minute.
It's somewhat a question of authority. The congregation meeting together and then putting the ballot or the votes that go out to every member for them to vote on. If the congregation says it must be done, the board needs to do it. Mm-hmm. If you don't direct and we've directed now, it does have to go to a full vote of the congregation. We've directed that the board needs to research this issue and meet the objective in 1 year. Okay, so that it would be for the following fiscal cycle. If you want to direct the board to do something this year and you want the congregation to do the directing, then you need to make a motion now.
Yep.
If you are pretty sure that the board is full of reasonable people and that they would act, if members of the congregation went to the board and made the case, you can leave it up to the board. It depends on how much direction you as a congregation want to give.
Okay.
I made a motion
Crap.
online.
I'm not used to being on the spot without notes. We are a congregation that is really struggling with a lot of emotional stuff right now. And I am really worried about sowing more division. And we are a frickin' slow-moving train. We have to send everything to committee. So what the hell? I'm going to move that, and Barb is going to have to word for me because I'm not going to get it right, that we charge the board with finding the extra money to raise our minimum to $15.98, okay? The base living wage, not just 15. Because I think taking money from the Parker Palmer Fund, worst case, is completely worth it for our employees.
So my understanding is that your motion is to direct the board to find the money to pay our employees the $15.98 this year. Is there a second? Vicki seconds. I'm sorry, I took over your job, Susan.
We're partners. I can handle it. All right. Is there a need for any further discussion? Is there anyone that has not spoken?
This is a new motion, so
This is a new motion.
So we're starting over.
I guess my question would be, maybe twofold. What does this do to the motion that we just passed? And by when would this motion take effect?
It doesn't change. Okay, the motion that we already passed is still active. So the board is still directed to, I mean, assuming that it passes the all-member vote, the board is directed to research this and come back at our next annual meeting with a budget that has the living wage in it. The current motion would, if it passes, would direct the board to find the money to pay it this year. So it would be an off-budget thing. Okay?
So that would have to be in line with the annual budget cycle, which starts July 1st. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yes, that's true.
Right,
Yes.
so it would be the current board would have to probably take action, either the current board before June 14th or the new board after June 14th would have to come up with a solution to be effective July 1.
Well, it's whenever we start paying people.
Which is July 1.
It depends on whether we're paying our childcare workers over the summer in terms of are we offering childcare, et cetera. So but yes, conceivably.
I mean, that would be the most logical place, is that we would be prepared to do this in alignment with the budget cycle, because that's the budget that's under consideration right now. Any other questions? All right. Any commentary coming from our Zoom friends? Okay. All right, so again, we're voting about whether or not this goes on the ballot that goes out tomorrow. And the motion, as I understand it, that has also been seconded, is to charge the board to find money in the 2022-2023 budget.
No, they didn't say that. Doesn't have to come out of the budget, just to find the money.
This is supposed to be the simple meeting of the year, folks. This is supposed to be the simple meeting of the year. But no, it's important. It's important. So to charge the board to find money to pay the $15.98 minimum per hour.
You can stop there.
I'll stop there. She says I can stop there. All right, tellers.
Wait a minute, is there a question?
Yeah, just quickly. While I support the spirit of that motion, I find it a bit ironic that, you know, in the budget, we have everything detailed to the penny for each and every line item, and we really don't even know how much this increase would be. So I know, Alan, have you had a chance to look at the numbers on this? Okay. So I just find that a bit ironic. I mean, we don't know if it's a neighborhood of what, 5,000 or 10,000 or 20,000, and everything else here is detailed to the penny. So while I agree with the spirit of it, I will not support this motion.
So I can speak a little bit to the numbers, in that I think it would be $8,000 or $9,000 to do this. This is, don't hold me to that number, please, because it's estimates and some of it is based on, we don't know how many hours people are going to be working in the coming year, especially childcare and custodial workers has varied so much. So, I mean, when you look at our whole budget, it isn't a huge number, but I hope, this is me editorializing, I hope either you're comfortable with other programs in the church getting less money, or you're going to increase your pledges. So think about that as you vote. Sorry, that was probably out of line.
All Are there any final comments?
And I have to speak against the motion, even though I do agree with the spirit of the motion. We're a slow-moving train, and there's a reason for that. And the reason is that we make reasoned decisions based on all the evidence in front of us, if we're the board that I hope to come on to, and that will be, may or may not be approved by the church. So, I guess what I'm saying is give us a chance to look and see how much money this is. Give us a chance to see what other programs might need to be cut, rather than, embracing something that we just don't know. And I'm new. Hopefully will come onto the board, but I don't know what a lot of these numbers are. So that's why it's difficult for me to support the new motion here, even though I agree with the spirit of it.
Is there any commentary from someone that's not already had an opportunity to speak?
So this is Rochelle Habeck, and she says, can we ask the board to get a real estimate and ask our congregation to donate the money to pay for it by the end of June? And a reminder for our Zoom folks, or for everybody, if we can say our names before we talk, because it's hard to recognize you with a mask on, especially if it's the back of your head that we get to see.
River Arts Iflin. Whether it's $8,000 or $15,000, that's not really very much in the amounts of money that we're dealing with in the overall funds of People's Church, and I don't see any reason to delay it. So I hope the financial people will figure out an estimate of what that might be, so we can have this start with the new church here. It's easy not to give people money when it doesn't affect you, but it'll make a big difference for the people that we're paying.
Are we trying to put them on the screen, Rachel? I'm glad I don't have to run that part of the technology. I'm challenged just doing my part.
Rochelle. Thank you.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you. I would like to support the idea that Zoe has raised and support that we do it this year. And I would vote against the motion as it's currently raised. We've already heard that we have a significant deficit, the first one we've had in a few years. So it's not as if our folks can be magicians to find the money. And I hear such strong, passionate expressions about living our values to do this. And I really think we need to challenge ourselves to raise this money ourselves. And we have until, the end of June to make that happen so that the board could do this and initiate this with the next fiscal year, which begins July 1st. So I'm going to vote against this, and then I would like to make a counter motion that reflects what I'm trying to express here. Thank you.
Are we ready to vote? Really, I'm just going to take silence as yes, that we're ready to vote. Tellers? Those in favor of charging the board to find money to increase the minimum hourly wage to $15.98 for all employees starting July 1, raise your voting card or use your raise the hand feature. You can put your cards down. Donna? Rick? So we have 13 in the room in favor. Zoom? 16. See? Thank you. 16 in favor in the room. Zoom? 8 on Zoom. For a total of 24 in favor. Those opposed, please raise your voting card. Yes. Oh. Those in the room, raise your voting cards. The tellers in the room can get started. We'll wait for Zoom to lower their hands and, okay, we're good. Okay, we're good. You can put your cards down if you're in the room. Donna? Rick? 29 in the room. Online? 14 against online. I get a total of 43. It means we've had a total of 67 people that voted. And I'm not, you really need me to do the exact math? So 50 plus 1 is definitely less than 43. The motion fails. Now, I believe Rochelle has an alternative that she would like to put forward. Does Rochelle have a motion she'd like to put forward?
Okay, I'm trying to follow the instructions. Sorry, thank you. I move that the board direct the treasurer to calculate the amount of money it would take to raise the minimum wage to the amount suggested by Zoe, for that to be initiated in the current or the upcoming church year, and communicate to the congregation the amount necessary and ask for contributions by the end of June to meet that additional expense.
Yep. We have a second from Connie. Moved and seconded. Rochelle, can you repeat, please? So can you repeat, please, Rochelle, so Denise can get it in the minutes for us?
Okay, is that good? Okay.
Yeah.
So, I'll try. I didn't write it down. I move that the board direct the treasurer to calculate the amount of additional money it would take to raise the wages of the staff to the minimum level proposed by Zoe, for the current or for the upcoming church year and communicate that amount to the congregation as soon as possible, and ask the congregation to contribute that amount by the end of June.
I'm ready. Denise, are you good? All right. It's been moved and seconded and open for comment.
I'm Martha Beverly. I'm asking Rochelle for a clarification. Does she mean hourly wages? She didn't use the word hourly. I believe when she first mentioned it, she might have said that. It's what we have been talking about, hourly wages rather than salaried. So please clarify that so we know precisely what we are voting on. Thank you.
I'm happy to add the word hourly and the specific amount of $15.98. And I'm specifically suggesting contributions for this purpose so that we know we have the money in hand.
So another question, I'm Nadine Godin-Nasani, and another clarifying question. So Rochelle, I'm thinking that we're saying if we raise enough money, we'll give, so do we have to state something? So that's not clear. So we're going to put it on there that we will know how much increase on the budget it will be to raise hourly wages to $15.98 an hour. And we'll put that out to the congregation asking for new pledges to cover that. And my question is, and if we don't come up with enough money, then what?
So Alan can correct me, or someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but in answer to Nadine's question, I believe that we would still be obligated to use any money collected to increasing wages, even if we didn't make it all the way to the $15.98. So that money, if there's a special collection for this, I believe we would still have to use that money toward wages, even if we can't reach the goal. Does that sound correct? Alan's giving me a thumbs up. So yes, it's the idea that we're going to take a special collection specifically for this purpose. Barbara, ready for the next?
I'd also like to point out that we don't know how many hours we're attempting to cover. So it may be that whatever money is collected toward this purpose would be dispersed at the $15.98 per hour, or the increase to $15.98 per hour. So it's not really that, until the money runs out.
Was there, did I see some hands back in the corner over here?
Want something?
I'm Sue Glenn, and I just wanted, when I heard what Nadine said about pledges, that's why I wanted to make clear that we don't, I don't think we mean money in hand. I think we mean pledges, although money in hand would be fine too. And again, there is a range of hours that these people could be working during the year, depending on all the different events that might be put in for rentals. So like I said, it's going to be all an estimate, experiment, whatever.
Barb's going to have her steps.
Hi, Gordon Bolar. So this is a special fund, as I understand it. Don't know if it's a special line in the budget or becomes one. I see a bit of a danger in this. And the danger is that you're voting with your dollars on someone's hourly wages. And if we don't get there, what does that say? This is over and above your regular pledge, I would say, or your regular contribution. what does it say if we don't get there? Right now, we're all feeling the spirit. What if we fall short? What do the employees then take away from that?
We have a Zoom person and then Tom.
Am I the Zoom person? I have a problem with doing anything based on pledges. I believe Alan has said in the past that pledges can be made but not collected. And so if we base increases in pay on the pledge rather than on the money received, we could end up in the red. Just a thought.
Thank you, Nikki. I'm Nancy Mitchell, and I just have a brief comment in response to Gordon's question about what does it say if we come up short. My question is, what does it say if we do nothing? And I know that we really haven't done nothing, but I think taking some action now is important, and that it says something if we are not able to do anything to increase wages now.
Tom, did you still have a comment? Tom and then Julie. Tom in the front.
Oh, in front.
And then Julie.
I'm Tom Hackley. Zoe, thank you for bringing this up. I think it's a real important thing for us to be discussing. And I have not heard a single person speak against going to a living wage for our employees. I think that's great. We're just talking about how are we going to get there. So I want to comment about budgets. Budgets can be approached two ways. One is to say, well, we got this much money, what can we do for that? And the other one is to be aspirational about it and say, here's what we want to do. How do we get there? And I think I, for one, support the aspirational approach. Let's set our goals, and let's say we want to get there, and let's find a way to do it. I did a quick calculation in my head that the cost of $8,000 or $9,000 that Rachel mentioned would be about $65 a year for each pledging unit, $5 a month. I think I can handle that. I, for one, am willing to do that and more if that's what it takes. So I would urge support for Rochelle's amendment, and as a board member, I will do everything I can to find a way that we can make that come true.
I'm Julie Schneeberger. I just am confused. Do you mean pledges? We're not going to give all the money that we want to give by the end of this fiscal year or not?
We really shouldn't use the term pledges. This would be a special project donation. Okay. And
so you're saying that if I want to give $100, let's just hypothetically, I would give it in June this year. They would take all of our amassed amounts that we're going to give in one special collection. Is that, because I totally support that.
yeah, we would.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not speaking as a parliamentarian, I'm speaking as the assistant treasurer. Essentially, if money comes in, are earmarked for a special fund, then that money has to be dispersed in the way that the givers intended, and we account for it that way.
And Denise, you typed in what Rochelle's, it is a special collection that we are suggesting. Yes?
So I want everybody to get paid fairly. And this feels like an ethical slippery slope to me. because we are saying as a church that, we're not going to give enough money to the operating budget, but we will give extra money for this one specific thing. And what kind of slippery slope does that lead us on? People can start earmarking funds for a specific department. So say all of a sudden the RE has tons of money and, building and grounds has none because people are voting with their dollars for what specific things they want. And I know that also ethically, so we do a special collection and they get more money this year, but what about next year? So if you vote for this, ignoring the ethical conundrum that I brought up, be sure you also vote for Gordon's motion, because we need to make it sustainable.
Yes, I would agree that what we're discussing right now is a short-term solution to address the immediate upcoming fiscal year. And again, we're already decided to put forward to the congregation to direct the board to integrate this into the sustainable budgetary process.
My name is Rachel Baer. I'm only speaking because of the psychological benefit of hearing things multiple times. But the two motions go together. It's very common practice in the nonprofit world to accept a grant or donation funding to start a program needs to happen with the intention of building it into a future budget for ongoing sustainability. And these two motions together do that. I'm strongly in support of both of the motions, and I intend myself to make a significant financial contribution to the special collection if the motion passes.
Is there anyone that has not yet spoken that would like to make a final comment? Yes. I think they're going to bring her back up again.
Is it okay to speak?
Yes.
Okay, this is Rochelle. I appreciate the clarifying comments that people have made. To Gordon's point, as Rachel just said, we've now provided for this for the future. So I don't think this is an ongoing ethical slippery slope. And we are just acting on this now because of the importance that we're placing in it. And so these two do go hand in hand. And we don't need to wait till June. The sooner we send in our check that is dedicated to this special purpose, the sooner the board will know what they have to work with. And also to Gordon's comment, we've seen this before over and over in our congregation. My concern won't be that we have to figure out what to do if we don't have enough, but if we pledge more than is needed, I think it would be reasonable to ask the board to dedicate that to offset the deficit if additional funds are raised. Thank you.
Are we ready for a vote? I see people picking up their voting cards, so I'm going to say that yes, we're ready for a vote. All right, so the motion in front of us is to direct the Board of Trustees to direct the treasurer to calculate the estimated amount of money needed to raise the hourly wages to $15.98 for the upcoming church year, and ask the congregation for a special collection to be made by June 30th. Those in favor, please raise your voting cards or raise the hand feature on Zoom. You can put your cards down, please. Donna? Rick? Zoom? I get that as a total of 60. Those opposed? What? We got to give Zoom a chance to put their hands down. Think of all the exercise you're getting today. You're ready? All right. Those opposed to the special collection motion going forward to the congregation? Rick? Donna? Rachel? 1. Okay. So with a total of 61 people voting, 60 vote in favor of putting this motion forward to the full congregational vote. So just to recap, if you want this to actually get put in motion and these directions to be official, you need to participate in the voting on the ballot that's going to come out tomorrow, right? This was the approval to send it to the full congregation. So at this point, we're sending forward two proposals to the full congregation. One is the special collection to help us with the 2022, 2023 pay rates. The second one is to direct the board to incorporate this into the 2023, 2024 budget. Neither one of those are formally amendments to the current budget with the deficit of 24,381 that's in your packet. So the final thing that we need to do for business today is we need to vote to put the budget forward as presented. These other actions will help us supplement this, but it's not an actual change to this. Is there a motion to move the budget as presented to the full congregation? Oh, Alan did it. Alan moved it. Do I have a second? I got a second. I'm taking steps I don't need to take, and I don't even know it. All right, so those in favor of presenting the budget as presented to the membership for adoption, please raise your voting card if you're in the room. Those in Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature. We are. And you can put your cards down. Rick? Donna? For a total of 40 online. 19 for a total of 59. Those opposed of moving the budget as, yep, gotta wait for the Zoom. I'm gonna go faster. Okay, those opposed to moving the budget as proposed forward to the full congregation, please raise your voting card or use the raise your hand feature. Rick? Donna? 0 in the room are opposed. 0 on Zoom are opposed. With 59 voting members, the budget as proposed will go to the congregation. So when you get the ballot to the full congregation, You got the nominating committee members for next year, Board of Trustees members for next year, the budget as proposed for next year, the special collection for 2022, 2023 dedicated to wages, and directing the board to address this issue in the 2023, 2024 budget. Those are the 5 things that will appear on the ballot coming out to you tomorrow. Voting is due back to the church, either by your electronic method or your paper method, if that's what you've told Melissa you would like to do, on June 6th. If it arrives after June 6th, we are not going to be able to count it because we have another whole group of tellers that have to get together and count everything and check it against the new standards of passing or failing in the new bylaws. So please, please, please submit your vote no later than the 6th. I don't think have I forgotten anything? Denise, you had anything else? Everybody breathe. Thank you. Thank you for having a wonderful congregational conversation. Thank you for being with us today and your commitment to this community. You know how hard it's been to stand here and keep my comments closed? Because I have every confidence that this community can rally to fund the things that are important to us. I have every confidence that the people in this congregation will support our staff and our programs, because this is what we want in our community. So thank you for that. And with that, we are going to do a final closing song. And just thank you.
It's number 145. Oh, sorry. All right, it's number 145, and I invite you to rise, embody your spirit to sing. As tranquil streams that meet and merge and flow as one to seek the sea, our kindred hearts and minds unite to build a church that shall be free from the bonds that bind the mind to narrow thought and lifeless greed, free from a social code that lives to serve the cause of human need, a freedom that reveres the past but trusts the dawning future more, and bids the soul in search of truth adventure boldly and explore. Prophetic church, the future waits your liberating ministry. Go forward in the power of love, proclaim the truth that makes us free.
This meeting is adjourned. Go in peace.